The Tao of Self-Confidence, episode 918. Welcome to the Tao of Self-Confidence, where I share stories of amazing women who have discovered their inner journey to self-confidence. Visit our website at thetaoofselfconfidence.com. Your inner journey to self-confidence awaits. Pre-order a copy of Bridging the Confidence Gap: How Empowered Women Change the World on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Indigo, and all major book retailers worldwide. Well, hello, friend. Welcome to the Tao of Self-Confidence, where I share stories of amazing women who have discovered their inner journey to self-confidence. I'm your host today, Sheena Yap Chan, and today I have an amazing lady on the show today. She is a career expert and healthcare advocate, and I'm super excited to have her on the show to share more about her story. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Sara Fung. Hey, Sara, how are you today? Maybe you can fill in a little bit more about yourself to the listeners.
Hi, Sheena. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, so as you said, my name is Sara Fung. I am a registered nurse by background. I have been in the healthcare industry for 18 years now. I spent most of my time working as a nurse in a hospital, and I also have done a lot of non-traditional type of nursing roles. I also am an entrepreneur, so I am a fellow podcaster like yourself. My podcast is called the Gritty Nurse Podcast. I'm also a career expert and coach, so I help nurses and healthcare providers find jobs that fulfill their work-life balance and really align more with the goals that they have. I released a book last year. It's called The Wisdom of Nurses, and it hit #1 in Canada, so I'm really excited about that. And I also am a speaker and content creator, so I do wear a lot of different hats, and I'm really excited to be here and share more of my journey and how I got there.
Awesome. Well, first off, congrats on your book being #1 in Canada. I think that's so awesome, especially because we don't see a lot of female authors, let alone Asian female authors or women of color, because I know you have a co-author with the book on it. And so I just want to say congrats to that. And Sara, what's your cultural background?
So I'm a second generation Chinese Canadian and was born and raised in Hamilton. And I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood. So I feel like I just always felt kind of like the odd one out. Like I wasn't quite the same as my classmates. And then when I went to university, I felt like I was too whitewashed to fit in with any of the other Asian communities that were there. So I'm kind of used to doing my own thing and just being myself. And for a long time, it was something that I struggled with. But now I really lean into it as just someone with a unique background and a unique perspective. And I think it's something that has been serving me well now, just leaning into those types of things that I was feeling different about when I was younger.
I love that. And the results show, right? You have a #1 bestseller book in Canada. You're doing speaking. You have a career that's really creating, that's really your purpose. And, you're able to create a successful career, not just out of one thing, but many different things, just by being yourself, knowing that we're not going to be the same as everybody else, and that's totally fine, and leaning into it. And what would be your favorite self-confidence quote?
I actually have a couple, if I can share them. So one is actually by Rihanna, and it's the minute you learn to love yourself, you won't want to be anyone else. And I like that because so many of us, at least for me, a lot of my time growing up, I always wanted to be like someone else. I wanted to be like certain celebrities that I saw in the media. I wanted to feel like this person or that person. And I think that as much as it's good to be inspired by people, they don't need another Rihanna or another anyone. They need you. They need your unique value that you bring. And another quote that I love is actually by Beyonce. And she says, "Your self-worth is determined by you. You don't have to depend on someone telling you who you are." And I think for me, that really resonated because a lot of times, like I mentioned, I never felt like I was enough of something. I always felt like I needed to be more of something in order to be successful, in order to feel confident in my own skin.
Thanks for sharing those great quotes. And self-love is not something we're taught to do, especially in Asian culture. We're just taught to serve everybody else, but really learning to take care of ourselves and loving ourselves, the good, bad, and the ugly, is so important in our journey so that we can have that confidence and see our worth. And so I love those quotes that you mentioned. And in your own words, how do you define self-confidence?
I think self confidence is really about being sure of who you are. I always had this vision of what someone who was self confident looked and acted like. And it's someone who is sure of who they are. They're strong and they're unflappable, right? So anything can come your way, and you're still going to be that steady presence. you're going to know exactly what you want and you're going to be able to get it. Just even knowing your own skill and expertise. In my industry in healthcare, there's so many times where people feel like they don't have enough experience. So it's something that I work a lot with when I talk to other nurses. And it's not really about how many years you have or feeling 100% ready to do anything, because the truth is, if you wait for that, it's just never going to happen, right? I've talked to coworkers who have thought for the last 5, even 10 years that they want to try something new, and they're still where they are because they haven't felt that confidence or developed that confidence to take that leap. I also think it's about being a thought leader, having your own original ideas, and being willing to try new things and embrace new ideas. And these are all things that I did not grow up learning. I think this has been quite a journey for me. Like I tell people all the time, my parents don't understand what I do anymore. They don't understand. I don't think they will understand. They don't know. They've never listened to my podcast. They don't really see me when I was doing media appearances. But what they understand is the book, right? This is something they can hold in their hand. They can walk to a bookstore and they can see that my book is there with my name on the cover. And so that part they understand. They also understand that I'm a lot less stressed now and I have more time to spend with them. And so I think they are very proud in their own way. Like I know when my book came out, my mom asked me to go buy 20 copies. So she had her 20 copies. She handed them out to all our relatives at the family dinner. You know, that was her shining moment. But this other kind of stuff is just really not something she understands, but she knows that it's something that I worked really hard for. And she's proud of the things that I've done.
I love that. And that's so cute that your mom went out and bought 20 copies. I mean, having a book can make a huge difference, right? You're seen as an expert. People look up to you more. I mean, I when I meet new people, I just like tell them, oh, add me on LinkedIn. And they're all like, oh my goodness, like I didn't know. So I was like, I'm just I'm just me, right? But because having a book, especially being signed by a big publisher, I mean, you guys you're signed by HarperCollins, which is amazing. And when you look at the stats of Asian women authors in general, like the number is very small. So being able to be signed by big traditional publishing houses is a big deal because it's not always easy. There's so many criterias that have to go through it. And, also building a following, building your visibility is so important. And you wouldn't be here without that, right? And yes, our parents may not understand, but they also understand money, right? They're like, if you're making money, that's all that matters.
Exactly, right? You're making money. And even just going back to that 20 copies my mom bought, she had me order it because I got a better discount. So she's like, I'm all about the discount. I need that discount. Make sure that you don't pay full price because I want to support you, but I also want to save money. So money speaks in our culture for sure.
So I really love that. And, what was your life like before your discovery of self-confidence?
I don't know if it was a particular moment in time. I don't know if I could say, oh, this happened and all of a sudden I became confident. Someone asked me the other day how I went from being a kid that was so shy in school that my teacher sent me for a hearing assessment because she thought I couldn't hear, to being a public speaker where I now speak in front of hundreds of people. And I think it was really about taking small steps over time to intentionally put myself in situations that I knew I had to speak. So in my book, I wrote about how in high school, I joined the morning announcements team. I had to read out the announcements in front of the whole school, but I didn't have to have all eyes on me because it was just the audio part, right? So I started doing that. And then at some point in my career, I started doing teaching. I taught prenatal classes to new parents. I taught continuing education at a college level. And then when my coworker asked if I wanted to start a podcast, I said yes. I just kept saying yes to things that I had no real reason to say no to. And I think over time, I developed my confidence that way. Then, when the media came knocking and they wanted to know what nurses thought about the pandemic, just kept saying yes to everything. And so, the more I had of these little successes, the more confidence it gave me that it didn't matter if I made a mistake or I stumbled over my words, or maybe I didn't say everything 100% correctly. People were resonating with my message and the way I was sharing my message. And so, these days now, I do struggle a little bit. I'm not going to say I'm confident all the time, but I think that knowing that it's okay to be yourself was the thing that really drove it for me. And being like you and I in a space where it's predominantly white, it's predominantly male, especially in the book publishing industry, in the podcasting industry. we're really trailblazers for people that want to do what we do. And if they can see more people like us doing it, I think it'll give them the courage to take that step themselves.
I love that. And I totally agree. It's the reason why I started the podcast because for me, representation was so important. And when I started podcasting, I don't even think there was hardly any Asian people podcasting, to be honest. And so it's not always easy to be the trailblazer when you're the first one out there trying to figure it out, not knowing if people will understand what you're doing or not. But I think if you have a big purpose, it really will help. And what was that point in your life when you realized you wanted to shift from, working a full-time job to having your own career? I mean, I'm sure a lot of the listeners would love to learn what was that shift that made you realize, or that aha moment that made you realize I can do my own thing and succeed.
Yeah, it wasn't intentional. I would say a lot of things were happening that were not great for me. So I was in a really stressful job. I had a toxic boss. I was in a toxic work environment. I was also really stressed because I had two young kids at home. So trying to commute to work that was really far away. The whole process was like dropping my kids off at school, and we were eating in the car on the way to that, then dropping my husband at work, then going to work myself, then, working a really stressful job where I had a boss who was a micromanager who was gaslighting me, and then doing that whole thing in reverse. And then just I hit a breaking point to where I had to go on stress leave. It was my doctor that said I had to go on stress leave. And that was just the first part. The second part was the hospital was fighting me on paying me to be off when I had a medical reason to be off. And, being told that stress is not a reason to be off work just really hurt because I'd never been off for anything before in my 10 plus years as a nurse, except for having my kids. And I think I just hit a breaking point where I was just so physically and mentally drained. I was going to therapy. I was trying to fight to get paid. And then they kept saying, you don't have a medical reason to be off, and so we're not paying you. And so essentially, you're refusing to come to work. So I didn't even know if my job was secure at this point. And I knew I had to find a way to make things better for myself. And I knew that the organization was not going to help me. So when my coworker asked me to start a podcast, I said yes, just to share the message of what I had gone through because no one was listening to us. And when I started thinking about, well, how can I, do something on the side that brings me a bit more joy and balance, that's where it came to me that maybe I could help other people with their careers because I had bounced around to so many different jobs over my career. How can I help them avoid the same mistakes that I made? How can I help them learn things that I never learned on this, like in school or on the job? And that's where it really started. And the pandemic was good and bad in a lot of ways. So obviously there was a lot of deaths that happened, a lot of struggles, but for a silver lining, it allowed me to actually grow both of my businesses in ways that I never thought was possible because there was a spotlight on nurses and people were listening to what we had to say. And I kind of rode that wave as long and as much as I could to really just figure out how can I have more of an impact? How can I rely on myself and not someone else to give me what I need out of my career in life?
Thanks for sharing that. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. And I know it's not always easy to start something new, especially when you have a family to think of, right? And it's important to sometimes think like, is this the path for me, right? Is this going to help me? And I'm glad you were able to take that leap, even if it was scary. And I know it's not for everyone. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of confidence. And so I just want to commend you for doing that. And because of it, what's your life been like now?
So now I'm full-time entrepreneurship. So I've been doing this full-time now since the end of 2022. And I think my life is completely different. So that crazy commute I talked to you about, I live now, I mean, I work at home. My kids live across the street from their school. I have family nearby. So all of that community I was doing that was crazy is not happening anymore. Obviously, I work for myself now. I can decide who I work with. If I have a client that we're not really working well together, we can address that. I get up in the morning. I have what I call slow mornings, which I see a lot online. People love to have these slow mornings. So after I get my kids to school, I just sit down with a cup of coffee and decide how my day is going to look. Some days I might work a couple hours, other days might be longer, but I do have a lot of flexibility that I never had before. And I'm essentially not answering to anybody. And I get to do what I love, which is just talk about the things that I like in terms of making workplaces better for nurses in healthcare, in terms of helping people with their careers, helping people get into entrepreneurship and sharing messages about what my life is like now and how I can help you get there. And I do talk a lot about, what it's like to be different. Because I think growing up, like, I didn't see very many people that I could look up to. I think there was like Connie Chung, who my mom always said, you should be like Connie Chung, you should do something like her. And just the very few actresses that there were, like Lucy Liu, there was just a few of them, not very many, but I really looked up to them and I kind of thought, how can I not be an actress, but how can I do something that's going to make more of an impact like they did? And how can I do it in a way that feels authentic to me and uses the skills that I have? So I'm never going to be a singer. I'm just going to be honest. I don't have that skill. I'm not going to do that. So just focusing on what you do have, I think is really important, even if no one else you know is doing it or has done it before. I think that's one of the things I learned through this whole process. Well, it's okay to be the first. It's okay to be like, for example, just going back to my book, we were the first nurses that had ever been signed with this publisher, as far as I know. And they kept comparing us to doctors in terms of how the book would do. And we kept saying, well, we're not doctors. This is a totally different profession. Yes, we're in healthcare. Yes, we help people, but nurses are not doctors. And because we were the first people in that space, I think they just didn't quite know what to do with us. And I'm getting more used to that, just being in spaces where traditionally either Asian women haven't been, nurses have not been, or people of a certain ethnicity have not been ever.
Thanks for sharing that. And thank you so much for paving the way and just showing people that anything is really possible. You can go out there and write a book about nursing and prove to them that it can be a #1 bestseller. And Sarah, to the woman who's listening to your episode, she may be in her own journey to self-confidence. What would be that one tip you would give to them?
I think something that I've learned over time and as I've gotten older is to care less about what people think of you. Because I know that as a kid, I was really shy. My parents would always say I was the last one in line. I would never raise my hand when asked a question. And that's very stereotypically Asian, right? Is that you just keep your head down, work hard, hope people will notice. But what I've noticed in this day and age, and maybe this is more of a digital world, is you really have to tell people what it is that you can do and the value that you bring. You can't expect anymore that you just get the work done and eventually the rewards are going to come your way. So you really just have to, if you're not feeling confident, I think one thing you can do is just write down the things that you are good at and what your strengths are, and then just start talking about one of those. Like maybe as women, as minorities, we don't feel confident doing that because we feel like it's bragging or we're bothering people. But if you can talk about one strength you have and in a way that it feels natural, so you're not going to go up to everyone and say, I'm really great at public speaking. I think that work it into a conversation, practice, and the more you practice, the easier it will come. And then more people will know about it and just kind of build from there, right? It's just small baby steps. I don't think there's any one piece of advice that I can say you would go from feeling not confident at all to being confident overnight. It's more of a journey. It's about being consistent and also surrounding yourself with people that lift you up. I think that's really important. Having a community that will have your back and wherever that is, whether it's in person, whether it's online, or maybe a little bit of both.
Thanks so much for those tips, Sarah. And if our listeners wanted to get to know a little bit more about you and what you do, check out your book, check out your podcast. Is there any links or social media profiles we can connect with?
You can go to my website, which is sarafung.com. So Sarah with no H, Fung.com. I'm on most of the social media platforms. I'm mainly on LinkedIn these days. So if you look me up there, you'll find me. You can also go to my podcast website, which is grittynurse.com. And for the book, you can Google The Wisdom of Nurses. It's available as a hard copy, ebook, and audiobook.
Thank you so much. And to our listeners, if you want to connect with Sarah, you can also head on over to thetowofselfconfidence.com and search for Sarah's name. Her show notes will pop up along with everything else that we talked about. And I just want to thank Sarah again for taking the time to share her journey with us. So thank you so much, Sarah, for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
It's such an honor to have you on the show. And to our listeners, be on the lookout for another new episode of another amazing woman's journey to self-confidence, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now. You can now purchase The Tao of Self-Confidence, a guide to moving beyond trauma and awakening the leader within on Amazon, Barnes & Noble's, Walmart, Indigo, and other major book retailers. Get your copy today. Thank you for tuning in to another amazing episode of The Tao of Self-Confidence. You can order your copy of Asian Women Who Boss Up book by visiting our website at thetaoofselfconfidence.com. Your inner journey to self-confidence awaits.